I do want to say that like it is one of those things I think that does a service to people, you know? It actually serves those that take on, and I think I just want to say thank you for sharing it, because it's not an easy thing to share. You know what I mean? So like, and as you get further away from it, it's like an old version of you that existed. You know, you're like, I remember that guy. I'm not that guy anymore, but I remember him. You know, and that's why I asked you the question that I had. You know, having gone through something like that. And I think about that person that I was when I went through it and the things that I was able to make in that process. I'm often curious if you get to a place, because I found myself in a place where I was grateful for it. I was grateful for him. Yeah. And I was grateful for his courage. I was grateful that he showed me that even if I go down that deep, that I can actually rise up and out of it. There's a resilience that you gain from it. There's just something. And I was curious if you had that experience yet, or if you're on your way there, or what you think about what it is that I just said there. I'm kind of curious about your perspective. That's why I asked, are you at all grateful? Because I found myself being grateful for it for some weird reason. Yeah. I don't know if you had that. What? Welcome to the show, G.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to have you on the show. I've been diving into your work, and I read a great interview about you on Urbanaut.com, and I was like, I have to meet you. So I'm so glad you're here. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Of course. Just to begin, let's go ahead and kind of dive into a little bit about you. So if you can, just go ahead and share with the audience who you are and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I'm Ci Demi. I'm from Istanbul. I was born and raised here. And I'm a photographer. I shoot for mainly international magazines, and that's how I make a living. Other than that, I have personal projects. Most of them, well, all of them are about Istanbul, because I think the city, in a way, defines me. So my personal projects usually focus on telling stories about myself, but through the views of Istanbul.
I it's one of my dream destinations. It's one of the places I want to go. And, you kind of see it through one particular lens, and it's almost romantic in some sense, And what I loved about your photography is that you're kind of giving us another glimpse into it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate it. And then there's actually two views that I've seen of Istanbul. One is the romantic version, and then one's like geopolitical. And you kind of have a way in between. It's not as if you couldn't, but like you have this in between that I really appreciate. But before we jump into your work and kind of get an idea of that, I kind of want to know a little bit more about you. And that's before you decided to become a photographer and start doing photography. Were you always somebody that was creative, or was it just something that just kind of came about? Talk to me a little bit about. I know I read about you that you studied literature first, and so talk to me a little bit about who you were before you were a photographer.
When people ask little children what they want to become when they get old, when they grow up, I always said, I want to be a writer. So I was that kind of person. Yeah. And I wrote poetry for a long while. I worked as a copywriter in my day job for 11 years. Photography was never a thing. I don't think we even had a camera while I was growing up. I mean, it wasn't a thing. Visual arts wasn't particularly in my life right until I was 28. That's when I got myself a camera for the first time. But I took it seriously and I started researching it and to see what people do with a camera, because I was instantly interested in photojournalism. I wanted to go see a war or something, that kind of thing. When I got the camera, as I mentioned, I took it really seriously. So it just happened. I started taking pictures. I started going to protests that seemed to happen every week or so in Istanbul. I started documenting them. I even went to war in Turkey for a short while. It wasn't a long war, but I was there for around a week. But I returned with not great pictures, and I had more questions than I had before. So I never published those photos. But that was my first year with photography.
What was it about? You started out in Italian literature. You're studying Italian literature, and I'm kind of curious. Like, what was it about Italian literature that was interesting you?
Actually, I'm not even very knowledgeable about Italian literature. I was initially interested in Italian horror films, Giallos. I loved them. I loved watching them, and visually they really took me away from this world. I mean, they were my escapist hobby, those films. So that's why we have university entrance exam, and I picked 2 fields, Spanish or Italian, because Spanish also has a lot of great horror films, and Italian. So that's how I got into it, really. I just wanted to learn the language.
Yeah, you said something in the interview that I thought was really, really interesting too, is that like this when you study in another language, it changes the way you think. And it actually changes the way you look at the world. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? I'm curious. I'm going through that myself, and so I'm kind of curious your perspective on that.
Well, when you learn a language to start to get into it, a whole new world opens up in front of you. You know, you can Google with that language and access information that wasn't previously available to you. Imagine that you know Turkish. You can go on BBC Turkey and look at all those ridiculous things and learn all about the country all of a sudden. And it opens up a whole new world for you. And the things you learn when you speak a new language makes you, in the end, a better human, I think, because you understand more and more things.
I think that's interesting. And I kind of saw that connection to photography. Do you feel like that's kind of what you were doing? You were learning a new kind of way of communicating through images, and you started to use it in that way?
That's I think, great way to put it. Yes, definitely. I mean, you are definitely using a whole another language when you photograph and present those photographs in a series. You are using a whole different language, and you constantly work towards making good pictures so that you will have these nice sentences about the world around you by using photography. So yeah, it's definitely a whole another language. Yes.
I think that's interesting. I kind of get this sense from you that you were reading and you were kind of enjoying being transported to new places. Was that, you said you didn't have a camera growing up, your family didn't. Was that something that was important to you and your family back then? It was reading and maybe sharing stories in some sense. I'm kind of curious where the origin of that comes, because when you start to look at your work, there is very much a storytelling aspect to you. So I'm curious how far that goes, how far back that goes for you.
Well, my family just left me be, and they gave me one thing, a great library. It was fantastic. It had everything in it, everything. Turkish translations, obviously, but it was a fantastic library, and I read a lot thanks to it. So that library played a huge role in me growing up to the person I am today. I read a lot of Russian literature, a lot of French literature, thanks to that library. And yeah, I think everything goes back to that, because my family aren't really artsy people or anything like that.
They weren't really artistic, but they seemed to, they amassed a library, so they had to be into literature to a degree. Were they, talk to me a little bit. I'm kind of curious, like how do you amass a huge library and put your kid in it? I'm kind of curious about them in some weird reason. You don't have to talk about it, but I'm just curious, where did they talk to you about the books you were reading, or like talk to me a little bit about that?
I'm just thinking, they were very young when they married, so I don't think they had much time to actually read all of those books, but something prompted them to put all those together for their children.
Yeah.
I mean, they care about that aspect of raising a child, so they put together a nice library. I never thought about that before, actually. I mean, just why?
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. So, when I was little, I was obsessed with Guinness World Records. Oh my God. I still have
me too.
The 93-94 Guinness World Records book recorded in my memory. I read that so many times. I'm looking at it right now. It's on the right side. Yeah, that's that. I love
it's
that book.
I think it's really interesting too. Like, I remember being fascinated by it too, but I think the thing that was interesting to me was they have so many records in there of things that I had never even thought were a thing. Mm-hmm. Like the largest fruit that I've never even heard of, like, or the tallest person that just so happens to be in a country I've never even seen the people of, you know what I mean? And I love seeing the images that they have in there. It was a great picture book too, because you had that visual record, and I loved those books too. I haven't thought about one of those in years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to, like, I guess I'm trying to pinpoint the kind of I know when I look at your work, I get transported, and I'm trying to figure out kind of the root of that. And I really, really appreciated reading about how you did the literature and stuff, like, because I've read another person that was he had a literary degree, and then he started photography, and and the way the titles, the way the images were sequenced, all of that stuff was super, super, super important. And so when you were talking about doing that early stage of photography, and you said you had all of those questions, you came back with more questions then you had actually good images. Talk to me a little bit about that. What do you mean by that? Was it, and is there a connection to this being able to tell a story? I'm kind of curious.
Well, for me, photography is all about being a witness. A photograph is an undeniable proof that you are there while the picture is being made. So this function of photography is appealing to me. That's why I photograph. I enjoy being a witness. I mean, enjoy isn't exactly the greatest verb here, but it's the one aspect that gives me satisfaction, being there. So I was curious about war, so I went there. I was curious about protests. I was interested in what people were saying. And I once read that all photojournalists start by photographing protests or that kind of thing. Because when you think about it, there are people who want to be seen and you want to show things. You obviously come together and create something when you go to protests with your photographs. I mean, it doesn't matter if they are good or bad or anything. I remember sending my photographs to news outlets, digital news outlets, and they were publishing them. And it was a great way to, learn how it works. Learn how it worked back in the day. To circle back to your question, I mean, I had more questions because, especially with war, because I didn't understand the things I saw, because my level of intellect and my life experiences weren't enough to understand what I saw. So they didn't reflect in my photography. I had to spend more time on them. This happened in 2016, and it's been a lot of time now. And I only recently started understanding what I saw. I'm not trying to be all mysterious and say things like I saw a lot of things. No, I wasn't in, I wasn't in trenches, or I didn't see a lot of deceased people or anything like that. But when you are in a war, when you sleep at night, you hear, machine guns or whatever, bombs going off. And sleeping like that, sleeping to those sounds, it gives you a new perspective. You aren't magically knowing everything, perhaps, but it gives you a perspective. But my photographs, those photographs I took back in the day, weren't very mature, weren't really understanding, and they lacked a certain thing that I love in photography, compassion. Yeah.
I think what you just said there was really, really powerful. And it shows a level of reflection on oneself that I think is really, really interesting. Like, I have family that is in the military and people that have uncles that have been in conflict, and they don't know how to talk about it because the people that they're talking to have no context, for what it is that they're going to be discussing, and so like you, I think in a sense, as a witness had no really. It sounds like you weren't 100%. I just love that you had that awareness of self to kind of come back and go, I don't think I understand what it is that I add here. I think that's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. The other thing is I was going to ask is you're self-taught in photography, right? Did you always, have you been kind of curating and developing your skills on your own, or have you taken any classes to do it?
I haven't taken any classes or some sorts, but I had a great mentor.
I think that's awesome. So you had somebody that kind of mentored you.
I worked at a documentary photography agency when I first started out, and I learned a lot of things from him. He's a well-known guy. I'm not going to mention his name because we don't talk anymore, because I don't know if he would allow his name to be mentioned. That's why. But he taught me a lot of things. Yeah, he's an amazing photographer. I mean, and sequencing, for example, I learned from him. That's to present some work in a way that makes you feel things. That's the most important lesson that I learned from him. Yeah.
I think I've always noticed that, you know what I mean? That like along the path of one's development, especially a photographer, you're speaking as if you're someone that's very experienced in photography. When you look at your work, you can tell there's care and attention to it, and how one gets there seems to have a lot of varying paths. Some do it through school, some are self-taught, some are this, and I like to hear all those different ways. But one common thing that I've noticed is that there is a person that comes along that has an impact, and there's somebody that kind of is a mentor. Sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's something that actually does that, and I think that's really important. So I'm also curious, is that like, how did you teach yourself photography? Like, what was your method? How did you? Because you're very good at it. So I'm like, how did you teach? Was it? Because I know you didn't get into a documentary agency just by being an amateur. You had to get some kind of skill before you got there. So how did you perfect your craft? Was it like trial and error? What were you doing?
One thing that's going for me, forget about photography, forget about everything that I've done. I think I'm a tasteful person. I have some sort of taste. That's without knowing anything. If you have taste, the rest will follow, I think. And when I applied for that documentary agency, they liked that I was willing to go to any protest and come back with at least one good photo. So then I met my mentor. He wasn't exactly my mentor, but he was there and I was asking questions. So he thought my pictures were rubbish. He was right. They were. But he told me one thing one day. I asked him, do you think I should put those war photographs on my website? He said, I don't think you should. I asked why. Do you want to be known for those photographs? I said, no, I don't want to be known for those photographs. They are awful. That taught me a lot of things. Just one sentence, just one question. How I learned how to take photographs. I mean, as I mentioned, if you have taste, if you look at a lot of paintings, if you look at a lot of photographs, you start to develop this thing that I don't know the name of. But I looked at a lot of paintings before there was even a mention of photography in my life. I was constantly looking. I was spending time with paintings. That's the only thing that is going for me, I think.
Yeah. Istanbul has a really rich art culture, and so it's got some great stuff, I'm sure. Was there a favorite artist or painter that you like, or
right? Well, my favorite painter is a Belgian surrealist guy, Paul Delvaux.
Okay.
1 second. I'm not sure if I gave you the right name, because I don't usually know the name of no, I'm sorry, 1 second. I don't usually know the name of painters, but yeah, Paul Delvaux.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, he is my favorite, and I use a lot of his approach to framing in my photos. Nobody knows, but I literally just go out and copy his framing. But he's a surrealist, and my work is very documentary. How does that work? Well, it works. When you look at my photographs, when you sense something, anything, I don't know. Yeah, that's because of that.
I love that. It's I know a lot of photographers that are actually like inspired by painting in general, but you kind of went, I hear Rembrandt, Caravaggio, you know what I mean? All these people, but they were using light very much like a photographer, Mm-hmm. But you went to surrealist painting. And, there's also, I don't know if you see this connection still again, it's that transporting to another place that is not this place. Is there something about that is important to you?
Well, I'm a complete escapist.
Okay. You've used that word a lot.
Yeah, because it really defines me, I think. I like escaping from reality. And with my photography, I try that a lot. I mean, even though I photograph reality to some extent, I constantly try to escape from it. And it's when you think about the choice of my favorite painter, surrealism is a way to escape from reality. You are playing with reality, but it also got escapism in it. I don't know if this answers your question, but yeah.
No, it strikes at I'm starting to see a commonality. I'm starting to see a through line, this connecting aspect to I've already gotten a chance to look at the work, and so I'm starting to see these connections, and I'm curious what I'm seeing little G, reading books, escaping, I see the horror movies, the Italian horror movies that are a completely different language that transport you to another country, in a whole different way of thinking, escapism. I'm starting to see it even in photojournalism to a certain degree. You're going to a place that may not be your place, and you're witnessing, you're seeing, and whatever. And now in your work, it's very I think I read that you kind of like to take a fictional approach. Am I right, or do you like to kind of craft your own narrative? And
Yes.
and I'm starting to see a common thread here. Why do you think that is? What is it about that? Why do you feel like you're that way? And what is it about? You're like, I don't know. I just the way I am.
Yeah,
But I feel like that sometimes too. You know, we all do it. You know, we just do it here now. You know, we just kind of watch other people live. You know, and so like, I'm curious about
website, by the way, looking at my photos to find something to say. Why I am the way I am, I have absolutely no idea. But I really enjoy, firstly, finding a title is very important for me. What is this series is about? I mean, I have to be able to answer that question. The title has to be able to do that for me. That's extremely important to me. It's got to be like a title of a book. Then after that you start reading into it with photographs. And it doesn't necessarily have to have an end or anything like that, but it has to be an adventure, at least.
I'm kind of curious now, which this is a fascinating approach. Do you come up with your title before you actually start photographing?
That really depends, but I think I've always came up with the title beforehand, before shooting.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, really interesting. And that also goes into your you're crafting a narrative. So you're like, okay, if this is how I feel and this is what I'm trying to communicate, now you're then going and looking at the world through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
That is really interesting. And so therefore you're finding images that match that narrative, and you're finding places and within your own city. That's interesting. You're almost creating your own virtual reality and then going and finding it. It's amazing.
That's a good way to put it. Yes, yeah. That's correct.
Yeah,
that's what I'm doing. Yeah,
that's really, really. I don't know that I've heard that before. I don't think that I've heard that before. A lot of folks, they start out with research, right? They're doing very academic work, or they just start photographing and they have no idea what it is that they're finding, and then all of a sudden that makes sense. But you're actually doing something that is quite different that I've never actually heard. So this is a good time to talk about that first series. Okay. And it was a series. We can take a look here in a second, but talk to me a little bit about that title. You were thinking about leaving Istanbul, if I'm not correct, right? And you were thinking about the implications of that. And the title that came out of that was beautiful. And then you started photographing that. So talk to me about that project, and then we'll take a look at some of those.
Okay. It starts in 2018 when I got into a massive depression because my hard disk was stolen that year. I lost everything and I got into a depression. Oh. And that lasted for 3 years. And I was thinking, maybe I should leave Istanbul, start all over somewhere else. And maybe things will improve when I go somewhere. I I got my answer only last year when I went to New Zealand for 4 months with the intention of living there, to completely moving there. And after 4 months, I realized that when you go somewhere, you take everything with you, even with your sleeping habits, everything. Nothing changes when you go somewhere else. So I was myself. Nothing changed. I was still trying to photograph the same things, but in New Zealand. That's how the series ended, actually. 2 photographs from New Zealand, and that was the end of it. My depression was well over by then. And the series is called No Offence If You Forget. That title kind of became like something I tell to the city and something it tells back at me. If you forget about me, that's all right, I was telling to the city, because I spent a year of my life in the house without going anywhere, really. That was 1 year before the pandemic, 2019, because of depression. And the city tells me that if you go to some place else and forget about me, that's all right. We can forget about each other. No offense. No offense will be taken. So I built on top of that, what would I want to take with me if I wanted to think about the city, and what would it give me as a, as a memory, as a, what's the word, keepsake or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, keepsake is a great way to say that.
Yeah.
Something that's it's a good proper word. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how it came about. I shot that for 5 years. I thought a lot about the city, and that project, I think, put me in the radar of many press outlets. I did exhibitions of it. I won Encontros da Imagem, Portuguese photography festival. That was my series was selected as the first project among all other creative and talented people, and I had a chance to exhibit it in Istanbul. Some pictures of it actually were in a museum for 1.5 years in Istanbul, Pera Museum, in a group exhibition. 11 artists. We were 11 artists. And my depression ended, and I saw that it was possible to bounce back. My hard disk was stolen, and I started from scratch. I made this series, and it was there. It was in a museum. It was a living proof that it was possible to bounce back. So yeah, that series was also my therapy, I think.
It's possible to bounce back. That is, I think there's probably people that need to hear that. I know I do sometimes. I got to thinking a little bit about, I had another gentleman that I was talking to, and he was talking about how there was this one moment. It was this photo shoot with a very famous person, and it just went horribly, and he decided to leave that industry altogether. And he was a photographer, he was a professional, and then all of a sudden he left it all behind. you know? He didn't lose a hard drive, but he just went through a series of experiences in his photography and in his career that made him take a leap that was just to leave it all behind and start over. And then he's been evolving ever since and took a completely different approach with his work. Do you feel like life was asking you to do that at that time? Asking you to shift into something different at that time, now that you look back at it?
I mean, I was certainly taking different photos when that happened. I started taking very thoughtful photos. So life, in a way, yes, pushed me in that direction, yeah. Because I started taking very heavy photos, visually, in their backstory and everything. They were, the whole package of a picture. They had everything in it after that.
I think it's a really interesting setup, and I think we've done a really good job of setting up this series so we can take a look at some of the images. So let's go ahead and pull this up, and we'll take a look at some of these.
This is my website, and we are scrolling down to No Offence If You Forget. And this picture is the most quotation mark famous picture of the series. I want to show you guys something about that picture. Whoops, this shouldn't happen. Yes. So remember I mentioned a museum, Pera Museum, the exhibition that we held there. This picture was printed from a 16 megapixel file. And when you got close to it, every detail was there, yeah. I mean, you could see everything. What I'm trying to say is, for the people who are listening to this, what you shoot with isn't important. Just shoot, and one day it will be on the walls of somewhere you like, somewhere you want to be, if you keep shooting. When I shot this picture, I was heavily depressed. I was taking new medication, trying to get out of that depression. But one day I saw this picture 4 meters to 5 meters printed on the wall of a museum. As I said, it's possible to bounce back. So, yeah, I wanted to say this to whoever needs to hear it.
So when you think about this image, this is for people that are just listening. It's the edge of you're looking out at a body of water. There's somebody sitting on the wall of or maybe even a step. It looks like, which borders the edge of a large body of water, and somebody's sitting there with their legs up, looking the other direction. And I really kind of enjoy. They're not looking at the camera at all. And tell me a little bit about what was it about this image, I think, that kind of sang to you. Why is this one, you think, the image that speaks the most about the series?
Yeah, because you see, none of my photographs are staged. This one is included. They are all they have this documentary quality to them. They are always something that I come across. So I came across this gentleman, and it was a usual day, but he was enjoying the city. This is the body of water you see is Bosphorus, and in the distance you can see Europe. We were in the Asian side of the city in Kadıköy, and he didn't care about anything really. He only cared about just sitting there. And there he was. I took several photographs. This was, in one of them, you could see his face, but I decided to go with the one where you couldn't really see his face, because I think this picture doesn't need a face. Then after this picture, shooting people from their backs became a motif of the series. In other pictures, you will see the pattern, I think. Okay. So, I shouldn't really talk about every picture one by one, but...
No, not at all. But you can kind of flip through and kind of talk about what it is you're thinking about, what you're when you think about the series of images together, what it invoked in you and stuff like that. You were talking about the state of depression that you were in, and you were kind of like, as you're selecting these, you don't have to stop and explain. But I think that first one, since it was such a famous one, I think that makes sense. But when as you go through these, you can click through as you want, as you wish. But then just kind of talk about the inspiration and the motivation and the feel of the series together, because you think in a series, you don't think as individuals. So talk to me through this. Click through as you wish.
Even now we are looking at them in full screen. I like looking at the thumbnails. But I'm going to, for the purpose of our interview, I'm going to flick through them. And what you see, my slow internet connection. What you see is a series of pictures that were made with a clouded mind. I think that's what makes this series interesting to me, at least. I will never be back in that state again. I will never be able to, visit that state of mind again, revisit that state of mind. But these pictures were made while I was heavily medicated, heavily depressed, and they all came to tell a story about me and Istanbul. Like this picture, I mean, I don't even know how I get their permission. I don't remember. I remember asking them if I could take a picture, but I don't usually do that. I don't get permissions when I take pictures, but I wanted to be, polite and ask for once, and that's how I got this.
You're using flash here too, so it would give it away. Yeah.
I always.
You're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, and he's driving a bus, and it's dangerous, and as I mentioned, people who are not looking at the camera became a motif, because I wanted to, put your own face in it and think about being there instead of thinking who was there. You take a step back and just look at the surroundings and look at the person who was there, and put yourself in their shoes, in a sense.
You know, what I like about these images is there's not always people. It's kind of the presence of people. I love these. You have a whole series of these where you have these nets on top of things. You know, even the back here of this statue. Yeah. But the other thing I'm noticing too is a lot of these are top down perspectives. You're looking down at something.
Yeah, there are some. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed a few of those. But of course, you know, you have your profile, but it's an interesting perspective. Like when you look through the series itself, what does it do for you? What do you think about when you look at these again, having released them, put them out there, coming from G in 2024? You know what I mean? When you look through these, what do you think about?
First thing I think about is that this edit that we've just seen doesn't do the series a justice, I think. I think I should re-edit this. I will do that later. But yeah, the main theme is the sense of loneliness and being on your own in a very crowded city. And the first picture, you know, opens that idea up to you when you first see it. Yeah. And you are on your own.
So true.
Just one man. I mean, we see two people only in this picture, and even that is a lonely picture too. I mean, sitting on top of a tree, two friends. Yeah.
They've made it cozy, which I really enjoy. Let's scroll back up and this top image here with the tree, with the net casted over it. The net casted over it, and it's kind of peeking through. That image, I think, was one of the ones when I was looking at your work that I was just like, bam, hit me right in the forehead. And one of the things I like about it is that you can feel a sense of time. You can feel a sense of there's just an interesting play here that's happening. And I was kind of curious what you were seeing when you saw this image, because I know what I see. But I'm kind of curious what you as the photographer were seeing when you saw this. When you talk about depression, that's what it feels like.
Oh yeah.
Like this thing, like that's just weighing on you, you know what I mean? And it's there all the time, like this, you know, it just seems to get heavier and heavier as time goes by. And you know what I mean? It like, and then all of a sudden you start to grow through it and you start to peek out the other end of it and see the other side of it. I saw like a poem in this song, and maybe I am just kind of invoking that into this, but I was kind of curious what your thoughts were on this one.
I mean, when I saw this, I knew it was a money shot, you know, as they say.
Yeah.
Because it's completely about depression, and it's a great metaphor visually, a visual one. And yeah, I knew as soon as I saw it, everything you told us about it, I instantly knew it, that I would be able to convey those feelings with this picture. I took several angles and stuff just to be sure, because I couldn't miss it. But yeah, this is a very touching picture for me too, especially thinking back my state of mind while taking it.
Yeah. I think this with the pool picture, The pool with the nets, those two. You're like, whoa. I've personally never seen a net on a pool like that, but it makes complete practical sense. But considering the state of mind that you're in, and it's like really, really strong.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really, really strong.
Those two pictures.
Yeah, those two for me actually called out the most. Go ahead.
When I look at them, I know why I put especially these pictures together. And now I remember why. Because every single picture has a memory attached to them. They are all heavy pictures for me. That's why I picked them. Yeah, I remember now. And I mean, this is from my grandmother's funeral. I mean, it doesn't get heavier than that. Right outside the frame, she was being buried while I was taking this picture. You know, in the beginning, I said the photograph is important because it's an undeniable proof that you were there. Yes, I was there, and I chose to take a picture while my grandmother was being buried because my camera was with me, and it was beautiful. That's why I took a picture. And this picture was also exhibited at some place, and someone even bought this picture. I mean, why would you even buy that? I don't know. Maybe they like it as much as I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if you've ever had to go through that experience in your life, you know, going to a place like that and celebrating somebody's life, you know, it's a ungettable experience. And I think that image captures kind of that. And when I was, it's almost like you said she was being buried a little off screen, right in the little corner of that. I think I did the exact same thing when I was going through an experience very similar. I looked away at the rest of it. And it was a common shared experience. I think there's something really powerful about that image. And so I'm not surprised it was bought at all. So this is great. So we can kind of continue on and kind of talk about that next series that's really notable for you, if you would like, or if you have a couple of more here that you kind of want to chat through, we can. It's up to you.
Just one more thing I want to say about this series is that I hate talking about this series because it's so heavy. That's why I wrote a lot about it.
That's why I asked that question.
Just so people can just read it and don't ask me anything about it. I mean, I'm not faulting you because we have to talk about it, but for 5 years, I already went through it a lot of times, and I'm glad it's over. Do you want to see the last two pictures of the series?
Sure, absolutely. Please.
Okay. Lightroom is opening. I'm going to show you guys the last two pictures, because I think I only showed it to a curator once and no one else has seen it. This is me in New Zealand, in Wellington. And this is a self-portrait of some sort. It defines my loneliness in that city. You can see it, right?
Yeah, of course. I see a little silhouette. A little shadow there of you. Yeah.
And I was trying to do the same that I was doing in Istanbul, trying to tell a story about the city and myself, but it was impossible because I knew nothing about Wellington and Wellington knew nothing about me, so it didn't work. The second picture from New Zealand, and as you can see, the motif continues even when I'm in the other side of the world. I keep coming across these bleak scenes, and are we seeing the picture?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, these are
another graveyard.
These are the last two pictures of the series.
I think it's interesting, kind of understanding your creative process. I asked you that question because, I've done some heavy bodies of work myself, and when I have to go back in and take a look at it, it's just like I'm done with that. Okay, but I'll talk about it. And so that's why I'm kind of curious. Are you at all grateful for that experience? Do you feel like it was something that was necessary for you to be who you are today?
Oh, I mean, let me share the project again. I said that a bit jokingly because it's also a little bitter because talking about it is hard. It's getting harder as time passes because I'm not at all depressed now. And
yeah,
2 years ago, it was easier to talk about it. But as time passes, it gets harder and harder. But the pictures are the living proof that those things happened. And I am glad that I made this series, because 5 years of my life were spent thinking about it. And some people will come across the series later down the road when this one will, eventually become a book. People will see it. Maybe I hope one day I will have to stop talking about it, but
yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad it's
I think, I was talking to another artist actually in Iran, and she was going through something different, but it was causing a state of depression in her. She was going through a terminal illness, and it was a type of depression, like you think you're going to die, and I don't know if anybody's ever gone through depression, but they also feel like that. And she goes back to that series all the time, but she's a different person these days. But I think what's amazing about this series, and I think why it resonates so much, is that this, in a strange way, and I think more now today than I've heard in a lot of ways, people are going through this. And they just feel stuck in, like you were talking about, being stuck in a house. You just stayed in your house. You didn't go anywhere. And but there's this moment, especially in arts and in photography, where you start to move that energy into the creative energy. You start to create with it. And there's something about that experience and the manifestation that comes from it, the making part of it. Like when you start looking at these images, you started to make, and you started to move energy again, and you started to breathe life back into yourself. There's just something about that story that I think is really, really important. And I think that is vital for some people to hear, that even in these moments, you can get out and make and do and be, even in those moments. And I don't want to diminish the experience of depression, because I've felt it myself. because it is something that is very, very, it's hard to put into words. So like, I think, I don't know that you'll ever stop talking about it. Unless you could take it off your website altogether and let it just surrender itself into memory. But I do want to say that like it is one of those things I think that does a service to people, you know? It actually serves those that take on, and I think I just want to say thank you for sharing it, because it's not an easy thing to share. You know what I mean? So like, and as you get further away from it, it's like an old version of you that existed, you know, you're like, I remember that guy. I'm not that guy anymore, but I remember him, you know? And that's why I asked you the question that I had, you know, having gone through something like that. And I think about that person that I was when I went through it and the things that I was able to make in that process. I'm often curious if you get to a place, because I found myself in a place where I was grateful for it. I was grateful for him. Yeah. And I was grateful for his courage. I was grateful that he showed me that even if I go down that deep, that I can actually rise up and out of it. There's a resilience that you gain from it. There's just something. And I was curious if you had that experience yet, or if you're on your way there, or what you think about what it is that I just said there. I'm kind of curious about your perspective. That's why I asked, are you at all grateful? Because I found myself being grateful for it for some weird reason. Yeah, I don't know if you had that. What?
I think I forgot to answer your question. Yes, I am grateful. Yes, I mean definitely. And you put it in a way that explains it really well. And now looking at it, talking about it, it's not easy. It doesn't come easily, but it's like I don't know. It's become a child that I have to take care of because it depends on me. And that's why I talk about it. I prefer not to, but I have to because it's a child. What can you do?
Yeah. I encourage anyone that is going through something like that. You know what I mean? To lift yourself through the creative process. It means a lot, but also, of course, you know. If anybody's going through that, of course, you know, find a doctor and do what you need to do in order to kind of address that. But this is one way of helping with that. But so you finished this series. You started to get recognition for it. Did the project about the earthquake come directly after it, or was it something that you were? Talk to me a little bit about how you slid into this next one, because I love the title again, but I also love the concept even more. Actually, it's like
this project was my first project.
Was it? Okay. I got switched. Okay.
That's my mistake because I talked about the newer one first, but yeah, this was my first project. 2017 and 2019 were the years I shot this project, and it's about, you know, whenever an earthquake happens in Turkey, everyone starts talking about what happens if a big earthquake happens in Istanbul. That's all people talk about, instead of the earthquake that had just happened. So everyone is expecting a big one to take place in Istanbul, but obviously we don't know when it will happen. And a lot of people are deadly afraid of it, including me. I mean, it's a nightmare scenario. If something happens to Istanbul, what is the rest of the country going to do? How are they going to even survive without Istanbul? And so, yeah, Will the World End in the Daytime is about that imminent earthquake. Scientists predict it to happen, and a lot of people are talking about it, a lot of guesses and stuff. And so, yeah, I put together this series of photographs that were taken in 2 years to talk about. And obviously the earthquake hasn't happened yet, so I just put together images that reminded me of that earthquake. So a little bit
I think it's
conceptual approach.
You had said in the interview that I had read that an earthquake had happened, okay? Mm-hmm. And you had talked about sleeping outside for, how long was it? A week, or was it like sleeping outside so that you would be caught in an aftershock? Yeah. Is that, yeah? And so it speaks to like anxiety. It speaks to impending doom.
Yeah, exactly.
This like constant, like, what if it's now? You know what I mean? And even the title speaks to that. And I got to thinking about sleeping outside for a week, anticipating something. Like that is just unbelievable to me. So talk to me a little bit about how you selected images, what pulled your eye, what this series kind of speaks to. Oh, the brick is perfect. Yeah. But it's on a nice made bed, the impending metaphor. I love it. All right, continue. So talk to me a little bit about your image sequence. Talk to me about the images.
This picture,
we'll kind of go through this.
This picture is my only stage photograph. It's a reference to Alex Soth's Niagara. Do you remember the cover?
Yeah.
The one that was taken in a hotel room. I made an Istanbul version of it. That's just what I did. And, while I was shooting it and while I was sequencing it, I put together pictures that were kind of in a sense scary to me. Like, they aren't exactly horror films, but I picked scary pictures. I picked unnerving, or how should I say it? Pictures that reminded me of the earthquake. For example, I want to talk about this picture because it's a very interesting one, aside from its visual presentation or whatever. The man in this picture lives in a neighborhood called Fikirtepe. Fikirtepe is famous for its the change it has been going through for ages. I mean, old buildings are being sold and new buildings are being built on top of them. And Fikirtepe has kind of become a symbol for what's the word? Oh my God, I forgot the word.
Is it gentrification?
Gentrification, yes, thank you. It's become a symbol of gentrification in Turkey and Istanbul. This man lived in Fikirtepe for 35 years. And I was asking him what he is doing. One thing he told me was extremely interesting. He said, we are waiting for them to buy my house so I can move on. He has a house that will be gentrified probably, and people are buying those old houses and demolish them and build better ones, newer ones on top of them. When you think about it, he's from Fikirtepe, but he is also not, because he has been waiting for all of his life almost for his house to be sold so he can be rich or whatever. 35 years is a long time. I mean, I am 38 this year, and yeah, that's almost all of my life. He has been waiting. That's why I took a picture of him. This is the
well, and it's that anticipation. You're leaning into that anticipation of change. Of you know what if you go back to that image,
mm-hmm.
It got almost a fissure, like a crack in the building there, and he's covered it up with something. You know,
Yeah.
like what was that behind him?
Yeah,
it used to have that kind of.
I think that's it.
I
They
don't even
were
know what he's covering up with.
Yeah, I don't know. They were covering something.
Yeah.
Probably
It's just an interesting idea. To wait for his house to be sold. That's that's interesting.
So a lot of symbols in this story. I mean, this is the Istanbul's third bridge that connects Europe and Asia, and there was a lot of drama before this one was built, and everyone rejected the idea for it to be built because it would mean that a lot of forests would have to be cut down, and nobody trusted the government to not sell those forest areas to, new houses or whatever. But they built it, and this is the bridge. I think this is like the most conceptual photograph of this bridge, because you can't even tell if it's a bridge. But yeah, this is the bridge, the third one.
So how do you see this intersection? Because I'm seeing an intersection by this interpretation of this anticipation of an earthquake, but also like you're also kind of blending two ideas together here, which is gentrification, changing of the land, and taking it for different purposes. How do you see those two common ideas coming together here?
Well, gentrification is happening everywhere in Istanbul. This picture is also a sign of it. And I am showing these things because this is something that we are doing against nature's will.
Okay.
I mean, it will mean nothing if that earthquake happens. I mean, you are covering up this tree to protect it or whatever. It will mean nothing. if it happens. And these stories that are happening in vain is a way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
And these are these small signs that I was able to collect to talk about the earthquake. I mean, these are just my excuses to talk about it. They may not be completely related directly, but these are the things that we are doing while the earthquake is looming over our heads. This is an interesting picture because it's got a very lengthy story behind it, but it's just a motif in the story. I mean, it's just a photograph of a soldier with his wife, and it's sitting on top of their bed. It's just, it's just there to provide a feeling. I mean, when you look at this, what do you feel? And then you are seeing this ballerina covering in fear or just to perform. You don't know. You're in the context of an earthquake. When you think about it, it looks weird. It looks off. But
you can't really get a sense of perspective on this at all. Like,
I mean,
is she hanging? Are you doing this from above? Yeah,
I put this in because it reminded me of those things people tell you to do when an earthquake happens.
Yeah.
So this man just sitting in front of a luxury cafe, just sitting there. And this is Üsküdar.
It's interesting. It's interesting. It's almost like two fault lines. Those cars are like two fault lines. The two plates together, and we're in between it. But yet we have this great cafe built on top of it. No. It's really interesting. I can, I can see you walking around the city. I can see you seeing things. It's really interesting to see your eye. This is brilliant. It's brilliant. It's really interesting to see what you see of Istanbul. And it's so unique to you. And it's got your own. I'm starting to kind of see your touch. It's really good. How did you get these reds? Is it?
The film Kodak Aerochrome? I imitated it in Lightroom. This is a fake.
Okay.
But I was imagining there are two infrared photos in this series. They are infrared because I was imagining in my mind, they were taken after the earthquake. So that's how I separated them from the series. If I had a chance to take a picture after the earthquake, this would be one of them, for example. We will see in other pictures, there is also one. This is an interesting picture because this was taken at the highest possible point of Istanbul. There is a mountain called Aydos in Istanbul, and I went on top of it and took a picture of the city from there. This is what it looks like when you look at the city from the largest mountain. It looks miserable.
Wow.
I think.
You think it looks miserable?
The city. It does, yeah.
Why do you interpret it like that?
I don't know. It doesn't look beautiful when you go to those streets you see from there. There is always something miserable to me.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
That's interesting. Well, you have a way of looking. What is the? Oh, I love this one, by the way. What is that? I don't even
This
know
one.
what that is. The capsule, yeah. What is that?
That thing is for the security guards, but
Oh,
yeah, but this picture is of a factory that was abandoned in the northern part of the city.
okay.
So yeah, I also used that infrared treatment in this picture.
Yeah.
Because it was taken after the earthquake. And yeah, these are, for me at least, these are the signs of an earthquake that has never happened.
I'm kind of curious. You have and I use that word a lot, by the way, in a lot of my interviews, I'm noticing. But you have. I can't help but sometimes giggle at some of them, laugh a little bit at some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Does humor play a role? Is irony play a role in your images? When you're taking that image, do you kind of laugh to yourself, or are you amused by any of this, or are you speaking more to irony than to humor at all? I'm because some of these, I look at these and I go, "That's funny."
Yeah,
but I don't know if that's intended or not. I don't know if that's. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I mean, the humor is there whether we like it or not. It's if it's funny,
Yeah.
It's there to be laughed at, and there is certainly especially in my work, there is irony and dark humor. There are elements of it. Yes, I also find some things funny. Let's find the funny picture. This picture is forever funny to me because the story is funny to me. Like this one. I mean, what the hell? Why is it there? It's a replica, okay. It's not real, but it's there. Right in
It's a replica, so it's not even real.
No, it's not real. But it looks
How big is it?
I don't know. It was the size of a regular rifle. I don't know about these things, but
Okay. Yeah.
Do you see those balloons on the bottom left?
Yes.
So this gun is rented. It's for rent. You can rent it and shoot at those balloons. But it's not real. It shoots out plastic things.
Yeah, little plastic pellets. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but when you look at the picture, there is this Bosphorus bridge, and there is this massive weapon. You don't know if it's real or not. It talks about Istanbul when you think about it, because 1 year earlier there was a coup attempt in this city. Do you know about it? Have you heard about it?
I do. Yeah. For those that don't know about this, kind of give us a little context.
There was a coup attempt, and they tried to overthrow the government, and there were clashes all night in Istanbul, in all over the country actually. But in the end, they weren't able to do it. So yeah, I was really affected by it, like everyone, because in your city you are hearing gunfights while you are trying to sleep, and yeah, it was an interesting time when you think about it. It's been ages. We forgot all about it, but it happened. So these signs of the earthquake also refers to other signs that we cannot control, just like nature. The politics of it, the politics of everything. There are fault lines of Turkey that are constantly breaking. There is an earthquake that is already happening, but it's not a traditional, a physical earthquake. But Istanbul, especially Turkey, is an earthquake country that is also being shaken by a lot of other factors.
Ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, economics. I love how you extend that metaphor into other things. And I'm so glad you went back to that image right there, that one of the gun, because it's another one that I remember when I was looking through your work. I was just like, I stopped on, like, what the heck is that doing? Just sitting out there in the open, like anybody can just go and just get a hold of it and let it loose. The other question I had about that particular image, let's go back to the gun one. Is that bridge another bridge that connects the Europe and Asia part?
Yep.
Yeah, and is this on the Asia part?
This is the... we are on the European part.
Europe.
Let me
it's
think.
just
yes, we are just the European part.
And it's pointing at the other continent. I think that's just there's just so much. Yeah. You could just. There's just always been it's a really interesting. There's a dark humor, which I appreciate a lot about your work, and you don't even need people in the image in order to kind of see what it is that you're thinking about. Would you say your work is extremely? Well, it's obvious. This is an obvious question, but you're making extremely personal work. And it's like it's almost like a reflection on all of these things. And since it is so personal, when you put it out there, do you feel a lot of people relate to it? I'm kind of curious the reception of, especially a body of work like this. It's talking about, one was very personal as far as depression. I know a lot of people can relate to that. But this, you're kind of taking a metaphor and applying it to the city through your perspective. Are you finding a lot of common minds, common relations to this?
I don't know what I did wrong, but this series was exhibited at Arles in 2018. Other than that, this
a great honor.
It was big. It was never exhibited in Turkey. I don't think anyone actually stopped to understand it. My photographer friends know about it. A lot of people know about it. I know that they do. But as far as reception goes, not many people understood it here in Turkey. But they did understand it in France.
Interesting.
Yeah, is
interesting.
It's a very old story, but interesting thing. I met someone like last month, and she said when she saw this story, she said, you should build on top of it. You should continue shooting it and try to make an exhibition of it in Istanbul. That's an idea. I don't know. We'll see.
It's you can keep flipping through the images as you wish.
Okay.
But you know, would you say that? And this is my own naivety here. Do you think people were in Istanbul think in irony, or are they very pragmatic? Kind of give me some insight there, and maybe would you say that people from Istanbul, the people there, are very pragmatic people, very like you know, realistic about things, or do they think in irony like this? You know, you have a big art culture there, so I'm sure they do. But I'm just trying to decode the reception there. I'm kind of
I don't know.
In a foolish effort here to make sense of it, you know.
No. I understand it really well, but I never thought about it before. That's why I don't have much to say, because not many people, as I mentioned, understood this project.
Yeah,
because it's a bit hard to explain too. I mean,
yeah.
Maybe it's not done. I mean, earthquake is our reality, as you know, from last year.
Yeah.
And maybe I should continue shooting it. I don't know. Maybe I can make a second part of it. Will the world end in the night time? That's another question. I don't know.
You know, I do want to encourage you to do that. If I can provide any encouragement for you, because number one, I really appreciate irony. I really appreciate a kind of look that's not the typical look into things, you know. And this is when at the beginning of this show, I talked about the two views of Istanbul that I've had, you know, and it's been through images. Mm-hmm. It's been through my own personal research and interest in the place. One was this romantic idea of it, and one's a geopolitical idea of it. Mm-hmm. And I think here you're kind of threading the needle between the two in your own way. One in the previous body of work, an emotional, personal experience. And in this one, you're kind of doing it in a lyrical way. You know, you're kind of doing it in almost a poetic way, a kind of irony type of way. But and even at that, it's not even ironical in some ways. It's very real. So like it's so complex, and I think that's what I love about photography is nuance. If I don't get it right away, that's what I enjoy. And it reveals itself the more I look at it. And this is my favorite books are like this. It's one of the reasons I'm into philosophy and I read philosophy a lot, is because I read it at different times of my life and I get something different. I can read the same book over and over and over again and get something out of it differently. And I think good work, in my opinion, as I experience it, I get the same thing. And I feel like that's what's happening here. And I do want to encourage you to continue, because I think what you're doing is writing a good book. One that takes time to write. But you're writing it through images. And so that's my encouragement there. And so I appreciate you taking the time to take a look at that. I do want to give you time to talk about a book that you had mentioned that you are working on, or have already done. but you had mentioned, yeah, I want to talk about this book. So let's take the time to do that too. Yeah.
Okay. This is my first book. It was published in December 2022. And yeah, it's a very small book. It's got how many pictures? 33. But it's an art book. It's sequenced in a way to, the sequence is the message in this book. It's a very small one. It's called Notion of a City, Şehir Fikri in Turkish. And as you see
let's
in
look
the
at some
cover,
of those spreads. Yeah.
as you see in the cover, the horror theme is there because I told the illustrator to, try to draw something horrorish. And so that's what she drew. So yeah, this is the cover. You are seeing some pictures that you saw previously in my work because I didn't shoot this book. I put together pictures for this book. And so it shares a lot of other pictures with my other projects. There are some exclusive ones, but yeah, when you look at my work, you can see the same picture in other places too.
In other series, so it's a combination of series that you're putting. This, I feel like I'm looking at a book about you, G, in the way you take images and the way you look at the world. But it makes sense because your work is very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost I don't sometimes some people like when people say that sometimes they don't because it kind of changes it. It's almost diaristic in a way. You know what I mean? Like you're writing a diary. I feel like I'm looking in your notebook, into your world, into your brain a little bit. The way you look at life.
Yeah. I will never I never intended this to be this way, but it happened. I found myself shooting personal stories all of a sudden. I thought I would dive more into documentary work, but apparently I had a lot of things to deal with myself first. So that's why my work is really personal. To talk about this book, it's got a trick to it. As I mentioned, it's all about the sequence and the selection of the pictures, right? In this book, in the entirety of it, there are no people, no animals, and no sign of language. All you are looking at is these lonely landscapes or details or whatever, because the book's idea was inspired from George Perek's novel that he wrote without using the letter E, a void. I think. Do you know about the book?
No, but I think it's brilliant. I have to know now. That's probably one of the most common letters in the English language. So it's genius.
Yeah. I think I may butcher the pronunciation, but I think it's called La Disparition in French, and he wrote it without using the letter E. So I thought to myself, what can I take from Istanbul that would make sense? So I took animals, humans, and language from it. So that's how this small book came about. if you go to my
That's
website, there
really
is
interesting.
a playlist of it. I made a playlist after we published the book. So you can listen to that playlist and look at the pictures and get a sense of what I actually feel about this city. So yeah, it's a small thing. I like it. It's not the greatest book. It didn't get any awards or anything, but I like it a lot. It's a great first book, I think.
When you're photographing, I like to ask how you think about your images in the world. When you're taking images, and maybe I already know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. When you're photographing, do you see it in its final form? Do you think about it on the wall? Do you think about it at all in the way it's going to make its way out into the public? Or are you just making because that's just who you are? And then eventually you try to make sense of it. I'm kind of curious about that final step, because there's a writer, and I don't want to mess up the author's name. I have an idea who it is, but they talk about photography as two edits, and they talk about one edit is the one where you're kind of editing a frame and you're composing it, you're putting it through a square and a camera, and then the second edit is when you actually go and look at those frames, and then you put them together in a sequence in order to kind of tell a story. Are you at all thinking about that second edit and how it makes its way into the world when you're photographing? And which one do you prefer, gallery or book? So take me through that whole.
Well, let me answer that last question first. I prefer gallery because book makes zero money.
So from an economic standpoint, gallery. But
I love books. I adore them. I collect them. I look at them every day. I mean, like, there are a lot of books here, but it's meaningful. It's great. But books are too romantic in this day and age. If you make a book, you have to love it. And I love it, and I will continue to make books just because I love them. Because when you put out a book out into the world, you are saying that I made this. You may see it 50 years later, but here's what I said about something, anything. Yes, I imagine firstly, I imagine my photos in a book. Galleries come later, but they are also important. As I'm shooting, I like imagining them in Lightroom, because that's where I do most of the work, sequencing, colors, etc. So yeah, I like seeing them in a book. I mean, I love it, but I'm still trying to. Make sense of it. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I just made one book so far, so I don't know much about these things, and we'll see.
I think that's interesting. I definitely see your work in a book for sure, and I know I'm kind of curious how people think about it when they're photographing, or if they're thinking about it at all. And so I appreciate your insight there. And I just have one final question for you, which is the one I ask everybody. And I'm kind of curious. We have a lot of people that are photographers that follow this show, and I am they either are probably at the beginning of their careers or in the middle, and it doesn't really matter. But I'm curious if you have any insights that you could share as far as maybe advice to photographers out there, maybe to think about. Do you have any great advice for photographers out there?
For the beginner, my advice is that shoot with what you have. This is my camera. This is my only camera. It's 8 years old. I'm still shooting with this. It's 16 megapixels. This one was for the beginner. And do I have insights? I must have, but I can't think of anything right now. And we talked about bouncing back. I mean, photography can and will save your life if you cling to it. I've seen it with my own eyes. It happened to me. It literally saved my life, really. So that can happen. And yeah, I'm a firm believer that it's possible to bounce back from anything, photography related, of course.
Yeah. It's, and I think about that original story, that kind of initiated what that was. You lost an entire archive of your images. Yeah. And when you think about that bounce back story, to kind of think about that, you just leaned on what it is you already had developed and in all of your skill and everything you thought about, and you just kept going. And the thing is you are not your archive, I think is what I got from that. You were the person that has that intuition to take the picture in the first place. And that story was fascinating to me. And I think if you were going to give that advice, and I'm doing this for you right now, which is I'm doing it for you. You're not your archive, people. You are. Yeah,
that's a fantastic way to put it. Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it's a great catchphrase. Yeah, you are not your archive. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in you as a photographer, your identity as a photographer is not the archive. It's not your past. It's who you are today and what you decide to do with it today. I love that. Once again, thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. Really, it was a wonderful conversation, and thank you for taking me into your world and talking about some of the things that you decided to talk about. And I think the show is great for anyone that decided to tune in today. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And to all those who have made it this far, thank you so much for joining us on the Urbanaut Podcast. Please consider liking, sharing, and commenting down below. All of that helps us with the algorithm. This helps us get this content out to people that may be searching for it. So please consider liking, sharing, and commenting. And also, if you want to support content like this, consider joining our Patreon as a subscriber and contributing to our show. This helps us continue bringing this to you. And as always, we'll see you next time.